Welcome to the Daily Brain Podcast. Today's word is, well, benevolent. And we hope it will reflect our desire to do good for your vocabulary.
I like that.
But you know us. We like to go kind of beyond the dictionary definition. Like, what's really fascinating is how this idea of, like, wishing well upon others plays out in the real world.
Yeah.
From individual acts of kindness to, like, the ethical dilemmas faced by entire institutions.
Absolutely. It's a concept that's been pondered by philosophers, economists for centuries, and it's still relevant today.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
You've sent over some fascinating sources that delve into these ideas.
Okay.
We've got Adam Smith's Theory of Moral Sentiments, the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy on benefit paternalism.
Right.
And even that intriguing case study about the A.P. Smith Manufacturing Company and their donation to Princeton. I'm ready to dive in.
Excellent. Let's start with Adam Smith. He's often remembered for his economic theories, especially the invisible hand that guides a free market.
Right. The idea that individuals pursuing their own self-interest can actually lead to overall economic benefit.
Precisely. But what's often overlooked is that Smith was deeply interested in moral philosophy as well.
Okay.
In the Theory of Moral Sentiments, he explores this tension between self-interest and our capacity for genuine care for others. He argues that while we are naturally drawn to our own well-being, we are also capable of acting with benevolence towards others.
So how does he explain this balance between self-love and, well, love for others? It seems like those could be at odds sometimes.
He introduces this intriguing concept called the impartial spectator.
Yeah, okay.
Imagine a figure who observes our actions without any personal bias, holding us accountable to a standard of decency and morality.
Okay, so it's like having an inner conscience.
Yeah.
Always kind of judging our actions and motives. Does that mean we're constantly second-guessing ourselves, worried about how we appear to others?
Not necessarily. Think of it more as a guide, a voice that prompts us to consider the broader implications of our choices. Smith believed that we all have a desire not just to be loved, but to be lovely, to be worthy of love and respect from both ourselves and others.
That's an interesting distinction. So it's not about calculating favors or expecting something in return, but about taking genuine pleasure and acting with kindness and integrity.
Exactly. And it suggests that we have an innate desire to live up to certain moral standards, even if it means putting aside our immediate self-interest at times.
But as you mentioned, Smith also acknowledged that we often fall short of this ideal. He talks about self-deception, right? How we tend to see ourselves in a more favorable light than perhaps we deserve.
That's right. We're all susceptible to this. We might convince ourselves that our actions are justified, even when a more impartial observer would see them as selfish or unkind.
This all makes me wonder. How can we become more aware of this self-deception? How can we cultivate that impartial spectator within ourselves and make choices that are genuinely benevolent, not just self-serving?
That's a question worth pondering, isn't it? And it's something we can continue to explore as we dive deeper into the concept of benevolence, especially as it relates to institutions and broader societal structures.
That's a great segue. Because, we've been focusing on individual actions so far, but your sources also touch upon the idea of benevolence on a larger scale.
Yes. Shifting gears a bit, let's look at the concept of benefit paternalism, which the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy dives into.
Okay, break that down for me. What exactly does benefit paternalism mean?
Essentially, it refers to situations where authorities, like governments or organizations, make decisions or implement policies that are intended to benefit people, even if those actions override individual choices or preferences.
So kind of like a parent making choices for a child, even if the child doesn't agree, but on a much larger scale.
That's a good analogy. Well, think about seatbelt laws.
Yeah.
Many people might grumble about having to buckle up.
Sure.
But ultimately, this restriction on individual freedom is meant to protect people from harm.
That makes sense. Are there other examples of benefit paternalism in action? It seems like it could be a pretty slippery slope, right? Who gets to decide what's truly beneficial for everyone?
It's definitely a complex issue with ethical implications.
Yeah.
Public health policies are another good example. Vaccination mandates, for instance, are often framed as a way to protect the collective good, even if some individuals oppose them.
And what about censorship? I've heard arguments that restricting access to certain types of content like hate speech or graphic violence could be considered a form of benefit paternalism. Is that a valid perspective?
It's certainly a topic that sparks debate. Some argue that limiting exposure to harmful content is a way to protect vulnerable populations or prevent the spread of dangerous ideologies.
Yeah.
Others view it as an infringement on freedom of speech and a form of thought control.
This raises some really tricky questions about the balance between individual liberty and the perceived good of society as a whole.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder how this all applies to the corporate world.
That's a perfect transition. Let's delve into the idea of corporate beneficence next.
Okay, so we're moving from governments telling us what's best for us to businesses potentially doing the same. How does that work?
Well, think about it this way. Businesses have a tremendous impact on our lives, from the products we buy to the jobs they provide.
Right.
But their primary goal is typically profit maximization.
Right. Yeah, that's the classic capitalist model.
Yeah.
But does that mean businesses can't also be a force for good in the world?
That's where the concept of corporate beneficence comes into play. It's the idea that companies have a responsibility to act ethically and contribute to the well-being of society, even if it goes beyond what's strictly required by law or directly benefits their bottom line.
So it's not just about maximizing shareholder profits,
Right.
but also considering the impact on employees, customers, the environment,
Yes.
and even the communities where they operate.
Exactly. The debate often revolves around the concept of stakeholders, who are the individuals or groups who have a stake in a company's actions. And what responsibilities does the company owe them?
That's interesting. So it's like expanding the circle of concern beyond just those who own stock in the company.
It's a shift in perspective from a purely shareholder-centric model to a more holistic view that recognizes the interconnectedness of business and society.
You mentioned a case study about the A.P. Smith Manufacturing Company. Can you tell me more about that? It sounded like a good example of this tension between profit and beneficence.
Absolutely. Back in the 1950s, A.P. Smith, a company known for making valves and fire hydrants, made a substantial donation to Princeton University. It was a seemingly generous act, but it sparked a legal battle.
Why was that? What was so controversial about a company giving money to a university?
Some shareholders argued that the donation was outside the company's core purpose and wasn't in the best interests of those who had invested in the company. They claimed that the money should have been used to increase profits or distributed as dividends.
So they saw it as a misuse of company funds, essentially.
Yes, from their perspective, the donation was a form of corporate waste. However, the company's leadership argued that supporting education was a way to benefit society as a whole, which ultimately could have positive ripple effects for the company as well.
It's a fascinating dilemma. On one hand, you have the argument that companies should focus solely on generating financial returns for their shareholders.
Right.
On the other hand, there's the idea that businesses have a broader social responsibility.
Yeah.
How do you navigate that tension?
There's no easy answer. It often comes down to values, priorities, and how a company defines its purpose.
Right.
Some companies prioritize shareholder profits above all else. Others see social and environmental impact as integral to their mission and believe that doing good is good for business in the long run.
And what about consumers? Do we have a role to play in encouraging corporate beneficence?
Absolutely. Our choices as consumers have a powerful influence. We can support companies that align with our values, even if it means paying a bit more or making some sacrifices. Every purchase is a vote of sorts.
So it's about being conscious consumers, taking into account not just the price and quality of a product, but also the ethical practices of the company behind it.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that our spending decisions have ripple effects that extend beyond our individual transactions. We can support companies that are striving to be lovely, in Adam Smith's terms, contributing to a more just and compassionate world.
It's a powerful reminder that we all have agency, whether as individuals, business leaders, or consumers. We can make choices that promote benevolence and contribute to a better world.
Right. And it's not about achieving some perfect state of utopian altruism. It's about striving to do better, making incremental progress, and holding ourselves and our institutions accountable to higher standards of ethical conduct.
This has been a really insightful conversation. We've explored the concept of benevolence from multiple angles: individual actions, government policies, and corporate responsibility.
And it's all interconnected. The choices we make in our personal lives, the policies we support, and the businesses we choose to patronize all contribute to shaping a more benevolent world.
As we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one key takeaway you hope our listener will remember about the concept of benevolence?
I think the The most important thing to remember is that benevolence isn't some lofty, unattainable ideal. It's a choice we can make every day, in big ways and small. It's about cultivating that inner, impartial spectator and letting it guide us towards actions that are kind, decent, and lovely in the truest sense of the word.
I love that. It's a reminder that we all have the power to make a positive difference simply by choosing to be a little bit more benevolent in our thoughts, words, and actions. It strikes me that we often think of benevolence as this grand gesture, like donating a large sum of money or dedicating our lives to a cause. But what you're saying is that it can also be about those small, everyday acts of kindness.
Absolutely. Holding the door for someone, offering a genuine compliment, listening attentively to a friend in need. These seemingly small acts can have a ripple effect, creating a more positive and compassionate environment for everyone.
That's so true. It's like that saying, kindness is contagious. And if we each do our part to spread a little bit of kindness, it can really make a difference.
And remember, it's not about expecting something in return or seeking recognition for our good deeds. True benevolence comes from a genuine desire to contribute to the well-being of others without any strings attached.
It's about acting with integrity and compassion, even when no one is watching. It's about making choices that align with our values and contribute to a world that we can all feel good about.
You got it. And this ties back to Adam Smith's idea of the impartial spectator. Even if no one else sees our actions, we can cultivate that inner sense of accountability, striving to live up to our own moral standards.
It's a powerful concept.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder, how do you think the idea of benevolence plays out in today's world, with all its complexities and challenges?
That's a great question. I think it's more important than ever. In a world that often feels divided and driven by self-interest, it's easy to become cynical or to lose faith in humanity. But I believe that the human capacity for kindness and compassion is still there, waiting to be nurtured and expressed.
I agree. And perhaps by consciously choosing to act with benevolence, we can inspire others to do the same. We can create a ripple effect that extends far beyond ourselves, contributing to a more just and compassionate world.
Precisely. And it's not about being perfect or always getting it right. It's about striving to be better, to make a conscious effort to bring more kindness and generosity into our interactions with others.
Well said.
Yeah.
As we wrap up this deep dive into benevolence, I want to thank you for sharing your insights and for helping us explore this multifaceted concept.
It's been a pleasure. I always enjoy these conversations.
And to you, dear listener, we hope this deep dive has sparked your curiosity and provided you with some food for thought. As you go about your day, consider this. In a world that often feels focused on individual gain, how can you be a force for good? How can you embrace the spirit of benevolence and contribute to a more compassionate and fulfilling world, both for yourself and for those around you? The answer, as always, lies within you.
Beautifully said.
That's it for today's deep dive. We hope you found it enlightening, inspiring, perhaps even a little bit challenging. Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep striving to be lovely in all that you do.